You're listening to the Today's Conveyancer podcast, the leading source of information for residential property lawyers in England and Wales. Don't forget to subscribe and sign up to our free newsletter at todaysconveyancer.co.uk. You can also follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter.
Hello and welcome along to the latest Today's Conveyancer podcast. This week, we have Fiona Barron, Chief Executive of Land Data, Pat Morgan, Chair of the Local Land Charges Institute, and Nick Dyoss, Director of NLIS, to discuss the work that your three organisations do around local land charges and the way that you're working together. And as we've been discussing just before we started to record, actually, while land registry reform is a big part of what's happening in local land charges, it's only a part of the story, and in fact there's a huge amount more work being done, which today we're going to talk about. So I thought it would be worth initially just looking individually at your organizations and understanding your purpose and vision within the organization. So perhaps Fiona, if I can come to you first, what's the purpose and vision of the land data?
So land data was set up in 2001, and we're a government-backed public-private partnership. So we're a PPP. We're a not-for-profit and a community interest company. And our remit then, still is today, is to improve the home buying and selling process and to serve the interests of the general public by making official property search information accessible electronically. Back in 2001, we launched the National Land Information Service, which everyone knows as NLIS, which is a hub connecting property search providers to local authorities and other sources of official data, including the Coal Authority and Land Registry. And a key part of what we do is to issue and manage the contract, which to run the NLIS hub. And we also issue licenses to the channels that connect to the hub. So channels such as Searchflow, Thames Water Property Searches, Index, and Express Legal. So these entities are able to connect to the hub and offer their conveyancing customers official searches.
Very useful to frame the discussion. Thanks, Fiona. Pat.
Thank you, David. The Local Land Charges Institute is the representative body for local land charges officers. We provide guidance and advice to our members to help them, and we host an online forum for them to discuss any problems they might have and seek advice from their peers. Our members' main concern is to ensure that they are able to provide prospective property buyers with the authoritative data that they need to make informed decisions about their purchases.
Thanks very much indeed, Pat. Nick.
Hi, David. Yes, so NLIS, what do we do? Well, we are a clever piece of secure technology that connects all of the local authorities in England and Wales, along with the Coal Authority and Land Registry, to a variety of search providers who serve the conveyancing community. So effectively, we're giving people a clever, secure, standardised service, bringing together about 400 different suppliers to try and make the house buying process get quicker. And if we do it well, you don't actually know that we're there.
Exactly how the very best technology works. You don't know it's there.
Indeed, it's just seamless and behind the scenes, and that's kind of what we hope we can be.
I said we were going to talk a little bit about local land charges and the work that's going on in the organisations that you're representing. I'm going to come perhaps to you first, Pat. How has the pandemic affected the ability to process, particularly local land charges searches?
Some councils were able to move remarkably quickly, effectively overnight, to an effective home working system. Others took longer to adapt, but they did get there in the end. Local land charges does depend on liaising with a lot of departments across the council, so the move away from easy access to colleagues and their information took some adjusting to. Undoubtedly, the biggest impact was on personal searches. Most local authorities opted to email personal searches as their offices could not open for personal inspection of registers. Many authorities still haven't resumed a business as usual service, and some are not open for in-person personal searches. That's because some authorities just still discourage visitors in person to their office. They try to conduct more business online, remotely, by the phone. But I do think, yes, there were some problems adjusting, as every business found. But I think on the whole, the councils did fairly well to get a remote service up and running pretty quickly.
From the perspective of seeing all the local authorities in England and Wales, I would actually say I was actually genuinely impressed as to how little overall disruption there was. Clearly, the first few weeks, we saw a number of councils closing for a few days just to put home working services in place. But I would say that got nowhere near to anything worse than 10% of councils doing that. In the majority of cases, it was seamless. I think where our memories were probably most scarred was the stamp duty holidays and the pressures and the demands that put on everybody. But if you look at what we're seeing now, and transactional volumes are still really good, you know, you're seeing 120,000 sold subject to contract plus every single month, listings improving. We're actually seeing that searches for being overdue are being chased less and less and less, which suggests that the overall service actually works pretty well and copes however local authorities are choosing to work, whether that's through visits or through online.
Fiona.
Yes, I just wanted to add to that a statistic that we pulled out a few months ago when we went to the Local Government Association conference, which is that in the height of the pandemic, when the property market was at its busiest, when we had that surge in searches because of the stamp duty deadlines, 63, these are NLIS hub figures, by the way, 63% of local authorities returned the searches in 10 days or under. And that was at the height of the pandemic. And last month, because we share this data with local authorities every month, so they can benchmark, we had just under 75% turning around in 10 days or under. And when I share those figures with people in the industry, they're often very surprised. I think, as Pat said, I think it's the personal search market that probably suffered the most.
So here's a question for the three of you. What other repercussions are you seeing as a result of the pandemic? There's this new normal moniker, isn't there, about how we now work? In fact, the three of us are actually sat in our own homes still. What are the other repercussions of the pandemic, and how are they still being felt in councils?
Like many in the sector, we did notice a drop in demand at the start of the pandemic. This changed after the Chancellor introduced the stamp duty holiday. We've mentioned this already, but demand for searches rose sharply to levels not seen for many, many years, and I've been in this business for a very long time. And demand has stayed there despite the holiday ceasing. We are now seeing a start of a slight drop in demand as interest rates rise and the overall cost of living. I think the fact that at the start of the pandemic, there was a period of, should we say, 3 months when the market really wasn't sure and sure what was going to be happening, and demand for searches certainly dropped off, and estate agents weren't allowed to open their doors, and viewings had to be done online. So there was definitely a drop, and that, I think, gave local authorities the time to bring in the new systems that we talked about earlier, the remote working. So by the time the stamp duty holiday did come into effect and demand just shot through the roof, I think we had time to adjust. We are still feeling not so much the pandemic, yes, in terms of remote working, but the demand is still there. Training new staff is obviously something that's much more difficult if you're doing it online rather than face to face. So we are adjusting and have adjusted, but as we said before, in the same way that lots of people in this sector and other sectors are also having to change and still feeling the repercussions.
What we have been seeing since 2020 is a demand, quite a large demand for our training services, which when we talk to local authorities, what we're hearing is that there's been limited knowledge transfer, probably during those pandemic years when people were working from home. We all know the benefits of being in the same room with colleagues, picking up what's going on and learning. And I think working from home has made it very difficult for that knowledge to be transferred. Also, we've seen senior local land charges personnel retire and new staff come in. So we have seen a demand for that, and we are creating new courses all the time.
I think from our perspective, we actually saw a disappearance of these seasonal trends in house buying. I'm sure we all used to remember that there was the summer lull and then there was the charge up to Christmas and things like that. That just completely disappeared for 2 years. Although interestingly, we are starting to see it return this year. And we have seen the usual summer decline through July and August. And we're already starting to detect there is a slight upswing with the return of everybody now that we're into September. So long may that continue, and let's hope the World Cup doesn't disrupt it too much, because it's amazing how sporting events stop people being able to view houses.
That's a very valid point, Nick. I'd not sort of thought about that. There is a recruitment crisis in conveyancing, and I've certainly heard that there's a similar lack of knowledge transfer, as you've alluded to, Fiona, in local land charges. It is a very intensive role, actually, isn't it? And local land charges officers have got a huge amount of head knowledge that they are unable to transfer or haven't transferred to incoming staff.
Both the data that we hold, which is a kind of historical corporate memory of data, and then the information that we learn about our individual local authorities over the years, those, yes, they do stay within our heads, and we do try and get some of them down, but there are many things that you can't get everything down. The land registry is taking over part of the local land charges service, and so this is in a way forcing people to document their processes more and enable easier, because we're into bringing a whole new system, enable people coming in to perhaps fit into a more structured pattern than is the case. That has been the case because local land charges sits in a lot of different areas in the local authority. In terms of recruitment, I have to say I haven't noticed a lot of faces disappearing, be they virtual. People do tend to stay in where they are for a long time, and it is a very intensive hands-on training period. I've mentioned that's more difficult, but I'm not aware. I think local authorities as a whole have a recruitment problem, but not necessarily local land charges more than any other.
Nick?
I think it's almost an inevitability that you will see this churn through either conveyancing or search providers or local authority. It's what do you expect with all the changes that we've all had to go through over the last few years? So I think as much as anything, not only I understand it's a frustration because you don't have enough staff or you don't have enough experience, but it can be a very valuable time to actually impart new knowledge, bring in new processes, which we have done at the Hub, to introduce new pieces of technology, to monitor workflows, to improve targeting of queries and all of these things. So rather than take it as a negative, we've actually taken it very much as a positive to upskill and train the people that we've got.
We've talked around the fact that local land charges is being migrated into land registry. How is that going to work in practice? What's the data migration element to it? And I'm going to come to you first on that, Nick. And then there is a human element to this as well, though, and I'm going to talk to you, Pat, about that. So, Nick, data migration.
Okay, what an exciting way to start the conversation. Okay, here goes. So very, very simply, the way that the data flows is it always flows from a Con29 to an LLC1. So it means that when you get your search result back, you cannot have an LLC1 dated before a Con29. Otherwise, there is the risk that you are actually missing what could be very important information. So what we have to do at the hub is, as soon as we're notified by Land Registry, we have some technology which we enable around knowing what date the migration is, to pause the ordering of the LLC1, because we know that the local authority will be returning that after their migration date and they're not allowed to do it. So we end up submitting the Con29 to the local authority. That comes back in its normal time, and then we have an automatic trigger that orders the LLC1. That's normally back in a couple of minutes. We then combine the searches and the Con29 LLC1 goes out the door to the relevant solicitor. But it sounds quite simple, and it is because it works. But that's the biggest risk to migration that you get, is you've got to understand how the data flows in the searches and to make sure that you're still supplying all the available data. And that's what we do seamlessly. And we've done it now for every single local authority that's migrated, and it works.
And Pat, coming back to that point that we've just chatted around, the human element, the fact that there's this knowledge and you've got teams within local land charges departments that have been there for a long time. You yourself, I think you've said you've been in situ for about 30 plus years. How are we ensuring that that knowledge is being transferred to Land Reg?
Yeah, the Land Registry originally intended to take over the whole local authority search service, so that would have been the LLC1 form and the answers to the Con29. They quickly switched to just the LLC1. Local authorities are still responsible for maintaining the new National Local Land Charges Register, and are still, or will still, answer the Con29 inquiries. Migrating the data is a very complex process with multiple data transfers and checking procedures. It is putting a strain on what are generally quite small local authority teams. This is actually an opportunity for local authorities to get all their processes down on paper and get them all documented so that everybody does follow the same way of doing things. And that is a way in which the historical knowledge that some longer serving members of staff have of getting that information down so that it can be passed on to the next generation of local land charges officers. Some of our directors think that they're actually losing the whole local land charges service, or it's being radically simplified. But local land charges teams are still needed to maintain the local land charges register and to answer the Con29. As Nick said, conveyancers now have to order their LLC1 searches and Con29 answers separately from two separate providers, although, as Nick said, not if they're ordering through people like NLIS. They risk having the two parts of what used to be one search arriving at different times. But I think the conveyancers will get used to the new system, even if they don't necessarily see a great benefit to it now or possibly later on.
There's some pain now for some later gain, we think, Nick.
I'm not too sure if there is a huge amount of pain at the moment for those solicitors that are ordering the official searches, because the providers out there really should know about gapping. They should really know about providing the LLC1 after the Con29. And I think that if any search companies out there are doing it the wrong way around, then you really must question how much they actually know about the process. But so far from what I've seen, I think the Land Reg are doing a Herculean task to move the data they've got. It's working seamlessly with us, so I would like to think that actually solicitors are reaping the benefits of that rather than seeing any problems.
Pat's suggested that the migration, although has been challenging, the result has been very positive. Fiona, what's been done to support councils during the migration?
And Data has been supporting councils with queries and also raising the profile of the service sort of higher up within the local authority, because I think, as Pat said, it's sometimes it's regarded as an admin service, and it absolutely isn't. You know, the teams that work within local land charges are extremely knowledgeable, and it it isn't as simple as, oh, land registry is taking over the LLC one, so therefore we don't need to worry about that. Yes, you do. As Pat says, the onus is still on the local authority to maintain the register. The onus is still on the local authority to answer the Con 29. So I think we've been supporting in that way, and I do know land registry themselves are extremely supportive, financially and also from the technology perspective. And all we've been hearing is some positive stories, how the migration has gone for the majority of local authorities.
So I suppose if I was sat in a conveyancer's shoes right now, I'm concerned. I'd want to know that the data that I'm getting is as good as it ever has been, or it's going to be better. How are Landata, NLIS and the Institute working together to ensure that the data that's being provided is the best possible data?
The local authorities are the originators and the custodians of almost all the information shown on searches. Local land charters officers are experts in their field. They check and double check information from across multiple departments to ensure that prospective purchasers receive accurate and up-to-date data to inform their decisions. NLIS provides a convenient channel for authorities to receive and dispatch searches. And this just isn't just an advert for NLIS, but the system does work well because the negotiation facility, if there are any queries before a search is submitted, once a search is submitted before it's been completed, or once a search has been completed, if there are any queries that come back, there is a fairly seamless system to for the conveyancers to raise any questions at any point. So I think we do work well to try and provide the information that purchasers need as quickly and as accurately as possible.
Thank you for that. The check's in the post, by the way. For that, but I suppose from an NLIS perspective, we are the beneficiaries of the information that comes out from the variety of sources at the local authority. I think probably testament to the quality angle, which we're always looking for, is that we see very few issues with searches once they have been relied upon. And I don't know how easy that would be to say for other types of searches using the conveyancing process. I hope it's also low because people are relying on these to buy their homes and they don't want problems. But actually, we see so few problems, post completion with the information that's been provided. You would have to say that the data is not only reliable, it's highly reliable and highly accurate and does the job that's intended.
I think, the whole thinking behind NLIS all those years ago was that it was recognised that products and service quality are hugely important, still are, probably more so to conveyancers today, and they need reliable data, and to know that the data is from source and they can trust it, and that there's consistency behind it and speed of delivery, which of course is really the whole meaning behind the hub, and that's all of these searches that go through the hub offer all of that security and quality.
I did have a question. There are changes happening within councils, aren't there, Pat? What are they at the moment in terms of merging authorities?
Yes, there are some authorities around the country that are moving from a two-tier system with a county authority, a county council, and district authorities. And current examples: Buckinghamshire, I believe, have just merged. Northamptonshire have gone from 8 authorities to 2, and there are changes in Somerset and Cumbria and North Yorkshire, where the authorities are merging to form unitary authorities.
What's interesting with the unitary authority piece is that from a land charges perspective, or certainly from a search perspective, they are unitary in name only. We actually see that each, take Northampton for an example, we still have to know where all the old individual local authority boundaries were, because those local authorities are still in existence for supplying local land charge information. So they will have different prices, different turnaround times. They will operate from different addresses. So actually, we again have a clever piece of technology that allows us to keep looking at the old boundaries, the old gazetteer as we call it, to make sure that the searches still go to the correct place, even though the unitary boundaries are in existence, again stopping rejections, reducing delays and queries. So we kind of have to operate under the new system but keep the old system running, and again it works well, and it will continue to operate whatever structure a new unitary authority chooses to take. We will still know where everything goes. So again, another seamless transition that just happens, and one that keeps the sort of process flowing as efficiently as possible.
We're coming towards the end of the discussion. Bearing in mind our listenership of conveyancers, have you got any top tips, for want of a better word, on preparing a search inquiry in this sort of new digital age, I suppose?
If I can come in there, as I'm on the receiving end of searches from the conveyancers, so I've got two very short points, which would be requests to conveyancers. So the first one is, please check the property address, the plan and the fees are all okay before you submit a search, and do contact the local authority in advance if necessary. We're here to help, and a quick email or phone call would save a dozen phone calls or emails later on. And the other one is, please don't leave your searches till the last minute.
Nick?
Well, apart from what Pat said, I suppose my personal request would actually be not to the conveyancer to be controversial, but to somebody out there to actually sort out what the heck parcel fees are, because that's actually the single biggest rejection that we actually get, is because there is no way of knowing how many parcels a property is. So anyone's got a clever suggestion, that would get rid of so many queries for everybody in the industry, not only just us on the phone call, but hopefully the people listening. It would be an amazing advance in efficiency, but I just don't know where you'd start with it.
It's been a really interesting discussion around local land charges. There's obviously a huge amount happening in this space, not least the land registry migration as well to contend with. From me, it's a thank you to you, Fiona, Pat and Nick, for joining the podcast today. The Today's Conveyancer podcast is available on your preferred podcast provider. It's also available on todaysconveyancer.co.uk. Thank you so much for joining. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you again soon.
You're listening to the Today's Conveyancer podcast, the leading source of information for residential property lawyers in England and Wales. Don't forget to subscribe and sign up to our free newsletter at todaysconveyancer.co.uk. You can also follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter.